Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to February. It's great to be here. And I just really want to thank Simply Snacking for providing a great product, beef and chicken snacks that my patients can lean to and I can lean to, but also for bringing you this content. I think this is the most profound podcast I've ever recorded, in my opinion. I think it will help the most people. And I think it's really something. And I keep thinking, gosh, some of these stories wouldn't be able to be shared with you in a timely manner if I didn't have Simply Snacking behind me and supporting me and helping out and encouraging. So I just want to let everyone know, this episode, it's powerful, it's really important, and it's brought to you by a great company who took a chance on this podcast and sponsoring me and allowing us to bring this content to you. So thank you, Simply Snacking. Please, buy their products, use them. I think you'll like them, and share them with your friends. So thank you, and please share this episode with your friends. I think this is one that's really going to impact and help a lot of people. I was really impacted by this. So enjoy the story, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for your continued support. Hello, and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This is a guy, this one I'm really excited about. This story is absolutely, like, I've been doing this for a few years now, and it still surprises me because I've heard these stories over and over. But, I think sometimes we see something. What happened is one of our guests, who's a great guy, said, hey, you should talk to this guy. Look at his story. And I looked at his story. I'm reading his Twitter feed. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. How come this guy isn't everywhere talking about what's going on? And, just on Twitter, it's Mr. Salazzo. And I want to hear the story behind that. Brett Ender. Man, your story, I don't even want to tell your story because I want you to tell it because it's so great. But welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
No, thanks so much for having me on, Dr. Brian. And I know we had a great chat a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying, I don't think that this is a coincidence, but just the fact that, I was a huge fan of yours since I watched Fat Fiction about a month ago when I first moved out to San Diego. And then the Twitter post that I had got picked up. You retweeted it. Obviously, I knew who you were. And now we're here. So it's pretty cool for me because I was really inspired just seeing everything that you're doing with your patients, getting them off insulin, you having great success with low carb and now more of a carnivore approach. So I think we're gonna have some really good stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, I know it is, man, because I talked to you already. So I know a bit of your story, but the frustrating thing is there's a lot of people with a story, not like yours is pretty remarkable, but there's a lot of people with great stories that they don't have a platform. And that's why I wanted this podcast to be, hey, let's talk about other stuff that's involved, other things in life, stress levels. I know your story, covers that also. So tell people your story, like going back, like, playing baseball, what your life was like and what happened and what brought you through this whole journey.
Yeah, no, that's a great starting point. So I'm 27 years old right now. I split time between San Diego and Austin. I'm from the New Jersey Northeast area, amazing parents, great sister. My mom's an amazing Italian cook. So I would say that I grew up with a plethora of home cooked meals, pastas, great dishes. I was always going to school with like some type of prepared lunch or dinner. I was always really fortunate that way. Definitely ate more of the standard American diet approach for sure. And baseball was really my thing and my passion growing up. So I was naturally in shape because I was fortunate because I was playing baseball and doing a lot of the training. But I would say that I definitely fell into that category of fit but unhealthy. I feel like that's such a good term, and I think a lot of people can resonate with that. But yeah, so in high school, I think I had around, it was like 20 or 25 Division I scholarships to pitch, and then also I was also an outfielder too. The first school that I went to was Seton Hall University, which is a small Division I school up in the northern part of New Jersey, and that's probably the first time period where I started seeing some issues with my stomach. And to be totally honest with you, a lot of it was coming from stress with baseball. Typically up to that point, I was playing baseball really for the love of the game. And I think maybe just the pressures of playing in college or like just feelings of inadequacy, I started noticing some issues with my stomach. And then you couple that with the fact that, I'm eating anything that I want. binge drinking is just naturally part of the culture. So every Friday, Saturday, it could be, 5 to 10 drinks. And I started noticing some issues with my stomach. I actually didn't tell you this when we first got caught up, but I got diagnosed with proctitis. So it wasn't anything super crazy, but that was like the first colonoscopy that I had. I think I was either 19 or 20 years old. So obviously very young to be having a colonoscopy. Got on some medication for that. The symptoms went away. I felt good. I actually then transferred to Babson College, which is a Division III school up in Boston, continuing the baseball career, majoring in business. And my stomach felt good, but continuing the same habits, right? Binge drinking, not eating well, not sleeping enough, stress from baseball, stress from school. It's a great business school. So you definitely feel that pressure there. And then everything came to a head in 2016, which was the summer going into my senior year. So I was back home. I was in New Jersey. I was working an internship in New York City at the time. So I would take the train in every single day, which it was close to a 2-hour commute one way. And that's when I started noticing in the beginning of the summer, blood in my stool for the first time. And I don't looking back on it, it sounds so stupid, but at the time, I don't know if I just didn't want to tell my parents or my friends. I just kind of let the symptoms continue to get worse and worse, to the point where probably after about 2 months of that, I was going to the bathroom legitimately 30 times a day, straight blood. I was throwing up blood. I probably lost 20 to probably actually close to 30 pounds, to the point where the last day of my internship, I took the train in. At that point, I could only eat like Gatorade and saltine crackers. That was like the only thing that my stomach could keep down. And I remember being on the toilet of the train for legitimately close to 2 hours, because I couldn't get off the toilet, because I was just nonstop going to the bathroom. Ended up going to the hospital, got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, had a colonoscopy, and that's when I got on Remicade. So, Remicade is a biologic that I think patients with colitis, Crohn's, I don't know what else.
Rheumatologic diseases, things like that also, yes.
Mm-hmm. So I got a big dose of Remicade just to get the flaring down in my stomach, because, right now I walk around like close to 190 pounds. I think I was down to 150. And just getting used to this new life on a biologic, on colitis. So my thing is that, the Remicade for me really helped get me out of that inflammatory state. So I'm not one of those people that's like anti-biologic, because I do think it really got the worst of my inflammation behind me, but it only took me to a certain point. So I got
when you're on Remicade, were you still on a bad diet and drinking and all that stuff, or did that change just because you were in so much pain?
Yes. So it's a good question. So I get on the Remicade in 2016. I go back to school. I thought I was going to have to miss my senior year, because they didn't know when I was going to actually be able to get out of the hospital. Luckily, I think I got out of the hospital like a few days before I was supposed to go back to school in August. So I got really lucky. And I started off being strict, no alcohol, that low residue diet that they tell you to follow, which is like bananas and chicken breast and rice and very, very basic things. And then gradually, like anything else, I start to veer away from that diet. So I'm going back to the drinking, I'm going back to the fried foods, I'm going back to not enough sleep.
Because you're feeling better. The Remicade was helping you feel better.
I'm feeling better, and I want to have, I wanted to enjoy my senior year. And I just don't think I understood the magnitude of the disease at the time, to be honest with you. And I was fortunate because I was on Remicade, so my stomach felt pretty good. But knowing this approach that I'm on now, I could have probably had a much better senior year and experience overall.
Well, you had 2 strikes against you. You're a guy. Well, 3 strikes. You're not married. You're a guy. And you're young. Like, yes. That's when we go, oh, I have blood coming out. No biggie. I'm not worried about it. And then you start realizing that the social implications, like you having to be on the toilet and the train the whole time, or, going on a date and having to excuse yourself and go to the bathroom multiple times and looking at you like, is this guy on drugs? What's wrong with this guy? Right. Because you're not going to say, hey, I'm going to the bathroom all the time. People don't realize how much of a, and then just having to know where the bathrooms are when you're traveling and all these kind of things that people really, it's a real struggle. Like, people will make fun of it, but just imagine your life. Like, people don't realize the implications of that.
100%, to the point where I can remember making up. I'm like, all right, well, what excuse am I going to make now? Because I'm on a date and this is like the 4th time I have to go to the bathroom in the middle of dinner. So you don't think of like, that's what's so interesting. And now, you know, I will tell everyone about this. I'll tell everyone about my symptoms. And the amount of people, Dr. Brian, that have said to me, wow, like I have IBS, or I've had this issue or that issue, it starts to get them more comfortable. And we should be talking about this stuff, right? Like you shouldn't have issues with your digestion. You shouldn't feel like you have to go to the bathroom, you know, more than 3 times a day, but we don't talk about this stuff because we think it's embarrassing or there's a stigma against it. So I always just think like the more open and vulnerable you can be, it builds that connection and helps people talk about their issues.
I think that's so important. You know, it's but and then seeking help, you sought help, you got better. And then and then just like always, just like everything, someone gets diagnosed with diabetes and they go, okay, I'm gonna eat healthy. Excuse me. And then they start going back and then they get messed up again, right? So it's the same
Exactly.
thing as when you're feeling better, you go, okay, I can do what I want now. And then you get back into the same traps.
Exactly. It was like the Remicade took me to that point where luckily it was able to get me out of that chronic inflammatory state. But it really wasn't until I started doing the self-experimentation with the diet that got me to the point where I am now. And that's what I always tell people.
So what happened? What was your journey along those lines? What did you see in that made you say, huh? I think it's the Sean Baker character, probably.
Yeah, he's the man, by the way, but which we'll talk about. So 2018 was really where things started to change. And the reason why I say that is because 2018 was when I moved into New York. I was working a tech sales job, got out of the house. And that was when I first started to experiment with cooking some of my own meals and having autonomy over really what I was putting into my body. So I can remember like starting to make just like very simple, like ground beef dishes and baked chicken breasts and steaks and things like that. And then right around, and I was doing endurance. This is when I started getting into endurance sports. So I was doing half marathons. I was doing some marathons. I started training for some triathlons. And so I was in the best physical shape of my life and I felt relatively good, but I was still having stomach issues. So a good example of that, I was signed up to do a half marathon in Lake Placid with my buddy Harrison, who's Clemenza on Twitter. And we trained for this race for a while. My stomach blew up right before the race, so I had to miss it. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, well, I think I'm in the best shape of my life, and I'm on Remicade, but I'm still having some of these stomach issues. Fortunately, you know, social media, it creates this great leverage. You know, you get access to people. So I noticed Chris Bell popped up on my Instagram, who's the creator of Bigger, Stronger, Faster. I know he's had issues with his weight. I think he had addiction to pain medication and alcoholism. And I saw this picture of him. He was talking about this carnivore diet that he was following, and he must have lost 80 plus pounds. Like you could tell he was completely different in his face. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, all this guy eats is red meat, eggs, and water. It's like the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I'm like, all right, well, whatever he's doing is clearly working. So there's something to that. Fast forward a couple months, Dr. Baker goes on Rogan, like kind of blows up on the internet. And I'm like, all right, well, now there's a doctor that's endorsing this carnivore approach. That's very interesting. So now my interest has peaked even more. And then I started seeing all these success stories of people that were affected. They claim that they were curing their Crohn's, colitis, IBS with carnivore. And all the signals, all the red lights are going off there. It's like, ding, 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 perfect. So there's people that are curing themselves through this diet. That's all I needed to hear. So in my mind, I said, okay, what's the harm in trying this for 2 weeks? And if I don't feel good, I'll get off of it. But if people are, you know, if they're having no issues going to the bathroom, if they're curing themselves, there's only positive that could come from that. So I have such a distinct memory of that point in my life of like going to Whole Foods at the time, buying all my steaks, all my ground beef, cooking it for the week. You know, I'm in like this tiny little shoebox apartment in New York, like setting off the smoke alarm and just starting to go down that rabbit hole. And after a month, my stomach, the symptoms in my stomach had completely cleared up. My skin was the clearest it had ever been. I was in the best shape of my life. I've never had anxiety or depression, but mentally I just felt sharp as a tack, and things that used to bother me and stress me out no longer stress me out. This is strict carnivore. Then I did 1 more month of strict carnivore. So I did 2 months total, had even better symptoms. My race times improved. Everything got better. And then since that time, I've probably modified more to probably like a Paul Saladino approach of animal-based, where I'll have two big meals structured around primarily red meat, and I'll mix in some fruit or some vegetables that sit well with my stomach, maybe a little bit of honey, doesn't spike my glucose too much for a long period of time. and I just experiment and tinker. But this is the approach that I credit with changing my entire life. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing, is that, tinkering a little bit. What you did was an elimination diet. So let me get rid of everything. Then I add stuff back in and see if I can tolerate it. If you start getting symptoms and you go, okay, broccoli's not working for me, because that's the thing, is not everyone has to be militant. I think we can get into our tribes and go, okay, if you have a avocado every once in a while, you're not carnivore, you're out of the club type thing, and yes. Sean's not like that, by the way. I mean, I had him on this podcast. It's worth listening to his episode, because I think a lot of people would really respect him and know him better. He's not just some guy that's not propagandist. He's not a guy who just goes out there and goes, I'm just gonna like do crazy stuff to get attention. He studied it. And then when you look at him as a person, when he's a war hero, veteran, saved lives, doing surgery on the front lines when bombs are going off around him, and refusing to stop his surgery because he knew the guy would die. He said, look, and that's the kind of character he is, even though he gets into to people's faces, and he's he has a strong personality type, but it's founded in science, and he's looked at the science. And I remember, like, around the same time that you were seeing him, I was like, yeah, this guy, I mean, he's fit, healthy, and he looks good, but let's wait and see what his coronary calcium score and everything else looks like. And then it comes back fine. And there's another Brett that he just put up his cholesterol numbers. I was like, oh my gosh, like, he's strict carnivore. He's eating bacon all the time. And you look at his cholesterol, I was like, wow, that is shocking, really, how great his numbers are.
It's incredible. It's so easy to put a guy like a Dr. Baker into a box too, because to your point, he's like this big hulking 6'5" guy. He's eating nothing but ribeyes. But then when you actually take the time to listen to him on a long form interview, like what you're doing, or on Joe Rogan's podcast, he's the last person to tell you that he has all the answers. He literally says, like, this is what's worked for me. It may not work for me in the future, but I've had amazing success with it. And he's going to just keep continuing to do what he's doing. And he's doing the self-experimentation. We get so dogmatic with these diets, keto, vegan, carnivore, animal-based. For me, it's just, this is what worked for me.
Exactly. What works for you?
Right? What works for you? It's an anecdote. I'm not a doctor. I don't have anywhere close to all the answers, but I'm just, to me, it's so fascinating, because I followed the diet of what my doctor is telling me to follow and what's considered normal by the US standards. And I end up in the hospital losing 30 pounds and chronically going to the bathroom 30 times a day. And then I'm also noticing after this, foods like kale and spinach and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and things that I'm told are healthy are sitting terribly in my stomach. Yet when I incorporate the red meat and the eggs and the bone broth, I feel better than I've ever felt. I look better than I've ever looked. Mentally, I'm sharp. And so it's very interesting to me.
Yeah. And it's, you have to listen to your body. And that's what ultimately, some people are better at fasting. Some people are better at eating carnivore. Some people are better on a more vegetable base. So it's kind of like how your body responds, like how your sugar is, how you're like a guy like you, I get your insulin. I look at all your markers. I'm like, you're healthy. Eat honey, man. I don't care. I mean, your numbers are good. You're not going to get diabetes. You're working out hard. You're doing all these things. So there's some people that go, that in the carnivore community, I hear them fighting. As a matter of fact, I was just at the conference and people were arguing whether you should eat honey or not. Well, if you're healthy and you're eating honey and you're good and your stomach's good and you feel good, who cares, right? But if you're 400 pounds and you're diabetic and your sugars are 300, I would say, no, you don't want to do that until they get to the state that you're at. Because I think an individual like you, like someone who starts out unhealthy, and then as you get your metabolic health better, like Sean Baker, he wants to eat candy and donuts sometimes, his body is going to be able to handle that just fine. Yes. But you can't say the same thing to my diabetic patient who's shooting insulin all day. It's a totally different organism, basically, right? I mean, your metabolic needs are totally different than an athlete like you who's fit and healthy and running, than someone who's sitting at their desk all day, right? Someone may not be able to get away with that.
100%. And it's like, let's look at, and it's funny too, because you're spending at these conferences, you're spending so much time arguing over, should we be eating a tablespoon or teaspoon of honey versus not? And it's like, why don't we look at the macro issues of like, what do your bigger meals look like? How are you structuring your day? How are you sleeping? Are you getting 10 to 15,000 steps of exercise a day? Like, or we're just nitpicking these little things, or even just like, are you in ketosis or are you not? Like, let's focus on like real food, like eating real food and living like our ancestors are supposed to live. And let's start from there. Let's start there.
I think that's what we can all agree on. Say, hey, look, let's cut out the processed junk, right? Let's cut out the Oreo cookies and the donuts and the cake and eat real food and go to whichever end of the spectrum you feel great on, right? So I have some people that feel great on one end versus the other. Say, okay, like I have one lady that I'm working with now. She's overweight and she's mostly vegetarian. And so it's like, okay, how do we okay, let's get rid of the rice, let's get rid of the potatoes, let's get rid of these things, and let's switch. But it's hard because she doesn't have a problem with eating meat, she just doesn't like it. So I'm like, okay, how about eggs? What can we do? What can we introduce to get you a good protein source, like, Greek yogurt or whatever? And we figure it out what works for her. Because if someone hates seafood and I go, you got to eat seafood the rest of your life, they're like, okay, I'm not going to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really figuring out what works for you, and for you from a gut health perspective. So how are you doing? Like, tell me the rest of the story. The Remicade helped you. And again, you're saying, hey, look, it saved my life, got me better, got me on track. And then you made some other changes on top of that. You got healthier. So what's happening with the Remicade now in your life?
Yeah, it's a great point. So 2019, right, is really when I started that carnivore journey, switched to animal based, really. And then also at that point too, I pretty much stopped drinking alcohol entirely, because I noticed for me with colitis, alcohol, fried foods, those were the two biggest triggers. I like, and a lot of gluten, bread. I know that if I'm eating those three things, you might enjoy it, but you're going to pay the price. So I cut all that crap out. And then every year my diet gets cleaner and cleaner. I would say I probably cook 90 to 95% of my meals, to be honest with you at this point. And so I continue to feel better. I've probably done 20 plus endurance races at this point. Pretty much fueled by low carb, a lot of zone 2 training. And the funny thing is that I'm getting healthier, but then Remicade, like anything else, has all these natural side effects to it. So in 2020, I started developing this really strange cystic acne on my face. I know I sent you that picture. So it was like on my neck, then it's going to my face, then it's on my back. It was literally covering me. And I'm going from dermatologist to dermatologist. No one knows what's going on. They're all prescribing me the same antibiotics. And it's really frustrating because I feel like I'm doing everything right. I'm following the best type of diet that I possibly can. I'm exercising, I'm getting sun exposure, and my skin is just having these chronic issues. With colitis, I was supposed to go for a colonoscopy every 2 years. So this past past March in 2021, I was like, all right, my stomach feels great. I'm hearing about these patients that are going off of their biologics. I want to do everything I can to try and get off of this and see how I feel. So I talked to my GI, I show him my skin. I said, I was like, doc, what do I have to do to show you that I can experiment with getting off this medication? And he said, let me open you up and then we'll look at your inflammation, your inflammatory markers, and then we'll have a chat afterwards. So he opens me up. All my inflammation is gone. There's zero microinflammation. And then he was finally able to say, look, because you're young, you take great care of yourself, you're very committed to this diet, I'm comfortable getting you off Remicade, and we're going to just closely monitor it. So if you have some flare-ups, we might have to get you back on. But for now, I'm comfortable with you going off of it. So that was March of 2021. And now we're sitting here just about a year later. My stomach feels better than it ever has. Not had any inflammatory symptoms. I've not had any flare-ups at all. And I'm just continuing to progress. And I feel like I'm becoming a better version of myself every single day. So it's pretty.
And what were do you remember the cost of your Remicade infusions?
$65,000 every 8 weeks for an infusion.
That's pretty wild, man. That is a pretty wild, you can afford a few ribeye steaks for that. $65,000 every 8 weeks.
And it's just me. And you think about how many other patients have Crohn's, colitis, autoimmune issues. And you're just taught, I remember being very explicitly told, you will be on this medication for the rest of your life. Every 8 weeks, you're getting an infusion. There's a risk of your body developing, antibodies to the drug or growing resistance to it. So we can't ever get you off of it. And there's no cure for this thing. So
plus you're knocking your immune system down, right? And that's not good in the days of COVID.
Yes, 100%. So, it's a very interesting story. And I have multiple friends that, it's interesting that they also have colitis, Crohn's, they're all on their medication and I'm not. And I've started to notice them leaning in a little bit more and saying, hey, tell me more about your diet, or can you write me a program? Because they see the success that I've had. And of course they want to be experiencing similar experiences for themselves.
So here's the big question. What happens when you go home and see mom and she sees you on this?
That's an amazing question, because she is
because I know I'm friends with a lot of Italians. They look at me and they go, look, I'll die a little younger. I'm not giving up pasta.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I first started this diet, I think like anything else, your parents, you want to protect your son, and they're in the mindset of, you can't have too much red meat, cholesterol, saturated fat. So they thought I was crazy, but then now they've seen the results that I've had. And I've also sent my mom different studies, and I think she sees that there's a big pool of information out there of other patients with colitis and Crohn's and autoimmune issues that are curing themselves through this diet. So when I go home, I try and eat as clean as I possibly can, but it's like, if she's making Sunday sauce or something like that, of course I'm going to have some, and I'm going to enjoy some pasta too. Like, I don't want to live my life without these foods. And I also know that I'm at a point, like you'd said with Dr. Baker, where I can have some pasta and then bounce back the next day and maybe do a little bit of fasting or some bone broth, and I can get my stomach back to neutral.
Have you ever been off the diet for any period of time, like 2 weeks or a month or anything, where you
I've
like
definitely
how about over the
yeah.
holidays? I mean, are you still pretty strict during the holidays, or is that?
That's a perfect example over the holidays. And I can definitely be type A OCD with it too. So like this holiday, I wanted to prove to myself, let's just eat how you would normally eat pre-diet, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just enjoy the time with your family. I hadn't seen them in a while. So, I was eating the pastas, I was eating the Christmas cookies, I was doing everything. And I could start to feel my mindset shift back to what I was like pre-carnivore diet. Like certain things that used to not bother me were bothering me again. And I don't regret it, but it was a good reminder that when you follow this template, you feel like you're the best version of yourself, and you can let yourself, it's important to enjoy the holidays and do that, but just know that if you are going to do that, there is a price associated with that too.
Yeah. And how about your gut when you were eating off? Did it go back to like feeling bad, or honestly, you did okay?
Yeah, honestly, I was starting to notice, like, going to the bathroom multiple times, and not a ton, but more than I normally do, for sure. And you can just kind of feel the discomfort in your gut.
Yeah, just feeling bloated, not feeling great, and all that. Yeah, because going back, I mean, in Low Carb MD, we talked about at the very beginning. I'm like, guys, I don't know anything. I don't know causality, but what I do see is my people who go low carb or they go carnivore, the big thing, like you were saying, is that mood, the anxiety, the stress. They go, yeah, stuff doesn't bug me anymore. I'm not, and I would say, in addiction stuff getting better. That's when on episode 13 is when Tro and I got destroyed. I did, actually, it was me. Because I was debating. I said, look, people change their diet and their mood, their energy, everything gets better. And this pediatrician from England was saying, you should have your license removed for talking about this. Diet has nothing to do with this stuff. I'm like, now we have so much data, but we were seeing it. But I'm like, I don't know why. But I would see my people go carnivore and they would be happy all of a sudden. They're smiling and they're like different people. I'm looking like, why are you so, like, they're off their Xanax or off their anxiety medicines. They're feeling better. And it's funny because, a movie like The Magic Pill, which I really like with Jason Fung, that was one that really, I saw that, and that impacted me, to see people that are on all these meds and all of a sudden they're coming off them. And then you go, wow, this is pretty remarkable. A guy like you to say, okay, I have ulcerative colitis, to come off meds, it's unthinkable for us Western medicine guys. So then you think about there's a lot of studies with the gut micro. This has been my focus, as we talked about offline a little bit, is, the gut microbiome, inflammation in the gut, all this stuff, how it affects mood, energy, serotonin levels. And it's really, really interesting. Because I think what happens ultimately is your gut microbiome is going to change based on what you're eating. So if you eat mostly fruits and vegetables, you're going to have a certain gut microbiome. If you're eating mostly meat, it's going to change the microbiome. So meaning the bacteria in your intestines. So does it mean it's bad or good? I don't know. I think your body just reacts to what you're giving. And I think if you're giving it a lot of process, if you think about it, natural food that's natural, your body's used to. When you start eating all this processed, terrible, like GMO or whatever, your body says, this is a foreign body in here. Let's kill this thing. And you start getting an immune response. The other thing, which is interesting to me, and I really have to dive into the research on this, but in your case, your colitis is, you're treating it by taking something to knock your immune response down. So it's your immune response to something in your gut that's giving you the problem, right? So psoriasis is the same thing. And you say, what happens if some of these people, I don't know, what if they have a parasite, or they have candida, or something that's causing inflammation, your body's reacting to that and trying to get rid of it. Your body's generally there to protect yourself, not to kill you. So you start looking at that and going, I'm curious, how many people, if you treat an underlying pathology or you get the gut microbiome right, that everything else starts to fall in place?
Yeah, it's It's so interesting. And that's actually a big goal that I have for 2022 is to just learn more about the gut brain connection. Because I feel like I've gotten to a certain level with the diet, but I want to try and take it a step further. And I think you brought up an interesting point too, where you try to never be dogmatic about these things, but it's like, just show me what other diets besides low carb and carnivore are actually getting diabetics off insulin. What other diets are getting people off their antidepressants? Like I don't hear, I could also be missing it, but I don't see any other diets that are
You're not missing it. You're not missing it. I think when you cut out processed food, and I think there's so much we have to learn, and I'm on a, I'm going to have some experts on, because I'm not an expert in this area by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm observing what I'm observing, and I'm seeing carnivores being happier, their guts better, they don't feel bloated, they feel like working out now, they feel like doing stuff, they go, oh, I'll just skip a meal, no big deal. They're not freaked out by skipping a meal here and there if they have to, if they're stuck in a meeting or something like that they're going to die with skipping lunch one day a year or something like that. But it's really interesting, and I think, and I've been observing this, and I believe there's a lot of I think we're going to learn a lot with gut inflammation and brain, how they affect each other. Just like what you're saying, short-term going off and you start getting these feelings again, right? There's being on edge, and I've heard it over and over again. And so I think the natural progression that I've seen in patients, they'll come in, they go, okay, I want to try low carb. And then they start cutting out processed, and then they feel good, and they go, okay, I want to do keto. Then I want to do, but they kind of transition to intermittent fasting, carnivore. That's just the progression that I see.
It really is.
And they go, I feel so much better when I'm eating this way. But, socially, it's a hard thing. Like Sean Baker, when I had him on the podcast, I say, okay, let me understand you, man. You eat just meat and water, basically, right? And, every once in a while he'll have a piece of cake, he says, and whatever, rarely on his kid's birthday or whatever, which obviously isn't going to have much of an impact on your overall health. But I said, how come you don't eat vegetables? He goes, I've always hated vegetables since I was a kid. I never liked them. Yes. He doesn't have a philosophical, he goes, I just don't like them. Why should I eat? If you don't like meat, I don't tell you to eat meat. He goes, I don't like them. I go, what about fruit? He goes, oh, I love fruit, but I get fat when I eat fruit and my sugars go up. I'm like, okay.
There you go.
So he eats meat. That's how he feels better. So not everyone is Sean Baker. I'm definitely not Sean Baker. So you realize, like, his body type and it works for him, and what you're doing works for you. So when people say, well, I don't agree with what you're doing, well, look at you. You look super healthy, and you're feeling great. So it's like, people will argue with you. It's like, well, he's feeling great. Leave him alone. Do what he wants to do. Right.
Exactly. As long as I feel great, I look good, my blood work, everything is healthy by your standards. It's like, who are you to tell me that what I'm doing isn't working?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing in it. But I think we're going to find a lot of this with mental health, with energy, with focus. Because look, as we get older, we know. I mean, Ben Bickman from BYU has done some great work on this and looking at it, saying, what is the underlying linchpin of all these diseases we're seeing? And hyperinsulinemia is a big problem, right? High insulin level. Everything from erectile dysfunction to dementia to Parkinson's, all these things, they're causally related. Not just saying, well, you have one and the other, maybe there's something to do with. No, it's like, this is causal relation. Hypertension, obesity, all these things, and you go, gosh dang it. I mean, if we immune function, so there's a lot we're gonna look. The gut has a huge role in immune function, by the way. It's really surprising to me to learn that after 20 years of practicing medicine, that no one really talks about it, but there's data out there. There's a lot of information. So all these things. There's a Dr. Hazan, I think is her last name. I'm going to have her on. She's really great. And she has a book that I'm reading right now talking about this gut microbiome and the importance. Very, very intriguing, very interesting stuff.
It's incredible. All I know is the only thing I can speak to is, once I started fixing my gut and going to the bathroom less and less, my mind started feeling clearer and clearer, more confident. And I genuinely feel like I am a completely different human than I was, not even just 2016 colitis 2 years ago, when as I was getting cleaner. It's unbelievable. And even with you, right? It's like, you look fantastic at Fat Fiction, but I can already see a difference in your face. Your face looks thinner. I can tell you've lost even more weight since that documentary, transitioning more to the carnivore approach. I know Dr. Filavadius had similar success too. So there's just so many.
Yeah, and he's a heart surgeon. And when I met him in Florida a couple of years ago, I'm like, what the heck are you eating? Like, he had a huge pile of meat. And I go, hey, the cardiologist must love you, man. What kind of doctor? He goes, I'm a heart surgeon. I go, no, seriously. No, I'm a heart surgeon. I was like, oh my gosh. But he started talking about the same thing. He started looking at insulin levels, and it's an issue. He goes, all my people had high insulin that I was doing bypass on, they didn't all have high cholesterol. So he started looking, he goes, what is the causative thing? And so those are things you have to start looking at that and saying, okay, how do I feel better? How do I, how's my mood better? How am I a better person? And the interesting thing of your story too, I think we need to touch on that before we close, is what happened to when you were in a support group on Facebook for Remicade.
Yeah, so I was in a 7,000 person Remicade support group. So what happened was about a month ago, I've thought about telling my story for a long time, but I just never found the right forum to tell it. So I finally wrote out this pretty lengthy Twitter thread on everything that I've been experiencing. And my buddy, Clemenza, really pushed me to press the tweet button, and it got some good traction. I think it's got close to 1,000 likes. That's how you and I got connected, and Doug Reynolds and a few other amazing people in this low carb community. And so I started getting DMs from all these people that had colitis and Crohn's and were wanting to learn more about the diet, or people that were just telling me that they had similar success trying that type of a diet. So I said, okay, great. I'm also part of this Remicade group, and all you see, like 99% of the posts, Dr. Brian, are just people posting about the negative experiences that they're having with the drug, whether it's skin issues or some other type of side effect. So I said, hey, why don't I throw this post in there? That way people have some hope of, here's a guy that used diet as a tool to get off of this drug that's giving all these people these negative side effects. And I thought it was going to have an overwhelmingly positive response, because that's what happened on Twitter. And literally, I think I received like 15 to 20 comments of just pure negativity, of people saying that I was dogmatic, anti-biologic. There were a couple of people that were like, oh, you're going to go back and be inflamed and be back on your meds again within a few months. Like, just some of I was shocked at the negativity. And I just thought it was interesting.
I can tell you, don't worry. Most of those comments are not from real people. They're either from bots or people who are paid. I'm telling you, there's a lot in that we're seeing, because I see people like, Jason Fung, who's a friend of mine, he's been mercilessly attacked by people. And it seems weird because it's like, it will be staged. So you have 10 people pick on him at one time, and then the next week a drug comes out for weight loss. Right? So, and you go, I wonder if all these people are somehow getting paid by a PR firm to attack people who have a different and so people like you are a threat. If you're talking $65,000 in infusion and you'd say, hey, look, I'm off it for 2 years, how much money is that in one patient? 100%. So you would think the healthcare guys, like the people who are running the big their insurance companies, would be saying, hey, let's look at this. You know how much money they could save? I mean, it is absolutely astounding that people, because there's so many deals behind the scenes that people don't realize are happening, that it's a really weird time we're in. But people like you say, look, let me take care of my own health. And guys like you make doctors crazy, because you come in and they don't know what to do with you.
Exactly. And the funny thing too is there were people that thought that I was trying to push some type of a product or a program, and I'm like,
exactly, because everyone is, right? Yeah, totally. Yeah, because if you're selling, if you went on exogenous ketones, for instance, go, hey, look, this made everything better, then we go, yeah, you're selling this thing and we don't trust you. And so that's why I want to have you on the podcast, because all these people go, well, that's just an anecdote, but look at your life. You're a life, right? And you're running Ironman comp for some crazy reason. You're running Ironman competition, doing all this stuff. And if you can't sit through a dinner on a date, how are you going to train for an Ironman?
Oh my gosh. And especially, right, like my race, I mean, I'm very middle of the pack. I'm not the fastest by any means, but it took me about 14 hours. And you see people that are healthy, because you're consuming so much nutrition throughout the course of the day. That's a big thing, is that a lot of people's stomachs blow up, and some people can't even finish their races. So here I am with colitis, and I'm not on my medication anymore. And I didn't have a single stomach issue the entire time. I didn't have any cramping. I didn't have any bloating. I didn't have to go to the bathroom. It was like I executed the day as perfectly as possible. And then 2 years prior, I can't even do my half Ironman because my stomach is chronically flared up.
And do you, like, on a day of a race, are you carb loading a bit or anything like that? Or when you're going to run like an Ironman, like something super intense like that?
Yeah. So I definitely follow that Zach Bitter approach, where I will
Zach Bitter's crazy. Are you kidding me?
Incredible. It's like, he's pretty much carnivore, and he set I think he set the 100-mile world record, something like that.
No, the craziest one he's done is the 100 miles on the treadmill. I had him on the podcast too. He's a great guy. And I'll connect you to. He's one of my favorite guys. Super cool and chill. And he goes, yeah, I just kind of like, he's so humble. And he goes like, because like I tease him because I go, like he was running like a 6 minute and 45 second mile for like 100 miles. It's like, dude, I can't even do that for like 100 yards. I mean, it's ridiculous what kind of athlete he is. It's really astounding, and he's a very humble, cool guy too.
It's incredible. Yeah. And he's been such a wealth of knowledge to have people like him that have a podcast where he will lay out his exact nutrition. So I wouldn't say it's not carb loading the way that I used to be, but I found carbs that sit well with my stomach. So like before a race, I'll have some steak with some white rice or some sweet potatoes. And then on the day of the race, I actually I'm a big sweater. So I love those element packs, making sure that I'm getting in, a few thousand milligrams of sodium every single hour. And then I've also just found, I find the gels and the type of nutrition that sit as best with my stomach as possible. Like it's not perfect, right? It's not the healthiest thing, but it's going to help fuel me through the day, because a lot of people struggle with those gels because it's pure sugar, pure carbs. It's trying to get in your bloodstream really quick. So, but there are a lot of different variations in different products. But what's interesting is I actually just did a half marathon 2 weeks ago. I was completely fasted for the race. I think I had a black coffee with some butter in it. And then I just did Manuka honey. I had a bottle of honey that I carried in my pocket. And I had Manuka honey, water, electrolytes, and I had the best half marathon. I think I PR'd by like almost 10 minutes. So
wow,
it's just interesting.
Yeah, so that's that just tells you something, right? And that might be the fuel source you run on. That's like Sean. I mean, Vinny Torchich was talking about these Italians would come out and they would have olive oil with some salt and all this. They go on this cross country hikes and that's what they're like. That's what you guys are. That's all you have. Like, yeah, yes. That's what we're fueling on. It's pretty amazing what you can do. Once your body's adapted to those kind of things. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, some of these mountaineers, it's almost like they were 10 to 20 plus years ahead into this high fat approach, where I know you can read some of these older mountaineering books and they literally say like a shot of olive oil at altitude is the best type of fuel you could put into your system. So they had like these little Nalgene vials of olive oil that they would take just to get that fat in their system and fuel them on these rigorous excursions.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, it's pretty wild because there was different schools of thought on carb loading and not carb loading and all these kind of things. So it's kind of cool to see. And then when you have someone like Zach who comes out and just crushes all the old records, like crush the records, right? They're like, he ran one and it was like a 100-mile race, I think. And then they go, well, if you keep running, you can do the 12. You set the world record. If you keep running for, another hour, then you're going to break the other record. Okay, I'll just keep running. Could you imagine like mentally when you're like running 100, like you're almost done. And then you go, okay, I'll keep running for another hour after that. Exactly. Pretty crazy.
It's incredible. And there's a lot of, what's interesting is in the ultra endurance community, there are a ton of athletes that are starting to transition to that higher fat, low carb approach. And, I think it's probably tougher to do that for these strict marathon racers because your heart rate's getting so high. But, these ultra marathons, people could be winning the races doing 10 to 12-minute miles where your heart rate's probably more that zone 2. And it actually thrives off of more of a fat fueled approach.
Yeah. And that's why like his second 50 miles are faster than his first 50 when he's running these things, because he just can go to another level. Everyone else is burning out and tanking, right? And he can keep going. And it's pretty amazing. And he knows his body. I mean, he's a remarkable. I mean, you should listen to the podcast I had him on. He's a cool dude. As a matter of fact, the one of all the episodes of Low Carb MD, we interviewed Zach, and his audio got screwed up. Somehow his computer it wasn't working right or something. It was just me and Tro talking and no Zach. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was a great conversation. So he was really kind enough to come back on this podcast. And so we can it was like the big fish that got away, so, and he's a cool guy. So I really enjoyed that.
He seems like he's got amazing energy. You kind of just reminded me too. I meant to say this to you. I think the lifestyle portion of what we're talking about is huge. And just for anyone that's listening, when I transitioned to carnivore, Dr. Brian, I was working a tech sales job in New York City where I was out with clients all the time. So, naturally there's a lot of drinking, there's whining and dining, there's eating foods. And I had no issue saying no, or I would just say, hey, I have some, I have colitis or I have autoimmune issues, or I'd even just make up things like, oh, I'm allergic to alcohol or I'm allergic to gluten or something like that. And you have to get into the mindset of like, if you eat this food, I like to focus on the way that I feel if I hate to say the word cheat, but drink alcohol or eat breads or glutens or what I'm not supposed to be eating. And I like to focus on how good I feel. So for me, the feeling of feeling locked in and having a great stomach means more to me than trying to impress someone or, relate more to your client because you're drinking with them or something like that.
Yeah, it's a huge peer pressure. It's a huge peer pressure. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, I had guys who lost weight during COVID. I'm like, what
Mhm.
the heck? And they go, well, instead of whining and dining all the time, I'm just like going downstairs and cooking up a hamburger or something to learn. It's
Mhm.
like, because that part of their job was whining and dining. And then when they couldn't do that any longer, they changed their lifestyle and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And they never really realized it until they were other people gained 30 pounds, right? Because they were stressed out eating cookies all night because they weren't going to the gym and they weren't doing a lot of social type things. So yeah, that was another one. And the other huge topic that we should touch on, we would be negligent not to talk about it, is the effect of stress on all this stuff, right?
Mm.
Because there was a huge study that just came out saying, look, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, there's a huge, they were basically saying stress is causing it, but I would say it's probably just making it worse, being
Mhm.
under stress, because we know, like looking back at and this is a huge thing with shingles, for instance, over the last 20 years of treating these things. Shingles always comes out at the worst, and that's the old chickenpox virus coming back, and it always comes out at the worst times. So we're seeing it when
Mhm.
your immune system's knocked down, if you're stressed, you're tense, you just had a big illness, you just had a surgery, your wife's in the hospital, whatever it is, and then boom, you get shingles. Like, great, now I
Mhm.
got this on top of everything else, and you're in pain and miserable. But the point is, your immune system stress will affect this, and clearly, because we see all these stress-related illnesses get worse, like
Mhm.
ulcerative colitis, or even irritable bowel syndrome gets way
Mhm.
worse when people are stressed. So that's a huge one too, being able to enjoy life and be happy, and it's a cycle to me, is that when people are eating right, their stress level gets better. But then
Mhm.
guess what? When they get stressed, they eat bad because they're stressed and they want to eat the cookies that makes them feel better short term, but then they feel worse in the long run. It's
Mhm.
such a cycle. And I see once people start using food for comfort, then all of a sudden, boom, that becomes your comfort, instead of saying, okay, maybe I'll go work out, or maybe I'll go get a massage or something different to control my stress level.
That's I see. That's such a great point, the way you say it that way. And look, it's not a coincidence. I think that I told you with baseball, I was incredibly stressed out, putting way too much pressure on myself. I start seeing issues at Seton Hall, and then it's just continuing to get worse when I'm at Babson. So, I kind of think that I'm in the triple threat where I have family history of stomach issues. I was eating the traditional poor standard American diet, and then I was chronically stressed out, and then not sleeping well on top of it all. So it's like all four of those things, I'm sure. It's like I look back now and I'm like, yeah, of course I got colitis, or if it wasn't this, it was going to be something else.
Yeah, I think that's important. Hey, one other thing, speaking of, since we touched on gut microbiome stuff, have you ever experimented with probiotics, prebiotics, kimchi, sauerkraut, apple cider vinegar, anything like that you've noticed any difference in your symptoms?
Yeah, I'm curious your take on it, because I would say I don't do it incredibly regularly, but I'll probably have a kombucha maybe like once or twice a week. But I love the taste of kimchi, like a steak with a side of kimchi or some sauerkraut. I know people have controversial opinions with them, but my stomach seems to handle it very well. And then I do take a certain type of probiotic that's specific to people with Crohn's, colitis, IBS, and I think it's called VSL3. I believe that's the name of it.
Yeah.
It's VSL3, or that was either discontinued, or Visbiome. I've taken both of those, and I do think I notice a difference when I take that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to me, because I think a lot of this, the gut microbiome inflammation, I think we have a lot to learn. So I'm going to have a couple of experts on this podcast to talk to them about it. Say, hey, what do you see? Because again, your gut microbiome is going to change with what you're eating and what you're doing and your stress levels and all that. Because we all know, like, someone's been stressed and then all of a sudden they get ulcers, and you go, why do you get
Mhm.
ulcers when you're stressed? Why is that? Increased
Yes.
stomach acid, or is it the protection gets worn down? That's what we think. And or is the gut microbiome change? And so, all these things are very, I think we're on the infancy of this stuff, but I think we can't ignore it anymore. We have to look at that, because we're a society where anyone who has a sniffle, we throw an antibiotic at it, and that affects all
Mhm.
bacteria in your gut and everything. So we have to look and say, okay, how do we best replenish that?
Mhm.
And candida is another big topic. I think we're going to touch on it. And that's one thing I've always wondered, is if there's a possibility that when you go carnivore, that you start cutting back your candida in your gut, or certain bad microbes like disappear, because
Mhm.
you're starving them out, because you're not giving them a ton of sugar, because they like to live on sugar, and a
Interesting.
lot of stuff likes to live on sugar. And you go, oh, when's like a guy in your case? That's why I was intrigued by your story, and I was
Mhm.
thinking, just say you had a parasite, right?
Mhm.
We treat you for the parasite, and then you go back to a regular diet. What happens to your gut? Do you get ulcerative colitis back, or was that the initiating problem that everything else made worse? It just brought it to our
Mhm.
attention. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of people. It's shocking to me how many people's gut health gets better when they change their diet. It's really amazing.
It's just, what do you have to lose? And just, my whole thing is like, just do the self-experimentation, like keep a food journal, right? Like after your meals, write down how you feel. And then you start to notice patterns with things. I started realizing, okay, if I'm eating these dark leafy greens with my steak, I don't feel as good as I should. Or if I put too much garlic on it, that triggers my stomach. Like now I know the things that I can run towards and kind of pair with my food versus these are probably the things that I should be avoiding. But most people don't take the time to do that. And it's so easy.
Yeah, and I think, it's one of those things. I mean, I have to look back at my career, I remember patients would bring in these things, go, look at this crazy thing. This chiropractor said they could reverse my diabetes. I was like, yeah, what are they going to do? Adjust your neck? But they were doctors like Dr. Berg saying, hey, look, cut your carbs, get your stress light, get enough sleep. All these things with, oh yeah, it doesn't matter here, just take your medicines, right? And then now I'm starting to realize, oh my goodness, like over the last few years, learning from a lot of the world's experts, being able to sit down and talk to people like this, like you, like one of the problems we've gotten into with low carb MD is we get so technical. We bring in all these technical experts, and it's like a guy like you goes, look, here's my life, here's what happened. I'm not a biochemist. This isn't my area, but I feel better and my life's better. It's like, who's going to argue with that? A testimony has way more impact than all the experts saying, well, there's what my study showed, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's kind of the thing that I've been really, my focus has been on. Okay, you gotta, like, these experts that are, that argue with Tro and myself, they'll say, well, we put this rat in this cage and we give it 500 calories of this, 200 calories of this, and we're like, well, people aren't a rat in a cage. We're dealing with life stress of baseball scholarships and dating and life and going through divorces and losing your job and stress. So how does a mouse respond to stress? Like if they can't go to get a beer, right? So that's what's happening. That's what's knocking people up. And we forget that we're humans and we're a little different than mice. So the world experts of mice are it's a little bit different, right? Unless it comes over and we see that, there's some great, I'm not saying that mice data isn't important, but I'm saying that's just one part of it. Because if you're stressed out and tense, you can have the best diet in the world, but you're not sleeping and you're drinking too much and you're right. It's gonna affect you. And I think we have to look at the step back in this podcast, like low carb MD. We're talking about the low carb, carnivore, all that stuff, but the sleep, mood, how you deal with your neighbor, all those things affect us, and that's what I'm saying. Look, there's more to the story about good health than just what we're eating. It's not the Mediterranean diet, it's the Mediterranean lifestyle. These guys wake up and go, I'm not going to work today. I'm not going to go fishing. It's too windy. Can I help you with your roof? Okay. Can you help me with my yard tomorrow? Okay. Like that. They're not like stressed out, protesting and fighting with everyone and, worried about politics and stuff. They're in their little town saying, oh, okay.
That's why I love our corner of Twitter, our amazing community of weirdos that are into the carnivore, low carb. There's also a big crossover with people that are into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency too. It's I don't know if you've noticed that at all, but like most of my followers that I've accumulated over the last month, they're pretty into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I think there's this parallel between real food and real money as well. And to your point, it's like once you fix your sleep and you fix your diet, it's just unbelievable the way that it affects the rest of your life. And I know for me, it's made me become such a better version of myself. It's made me become a better son, a better friend, a better boyfriend. It's made me want to really figure out, what is my calling and get better at my job and just kind of level up in all aspects. And I think a lot of people would have similar results if they took care of those two things.
Yeah, and I think that's the point is a lot of the people in the low carb community, a lot of people like who you're dealing with, like Zach Bitter, this guy's a world expert. And he goes, here's my diet. He's not saying, oh, I figured this out myself. I'm not telling anyone, holding it to myself. And what you're saying is like, look, this helped me. Maybe it'll help you. You don't make any money on people changing their lifestyle and all this stuff. And so that's where there's so much criticism from people that don't understand. They think because we're so jaded now that everyone says you have an agenda. Yes. Like for me, it's like, I don't care. Most of the people listening to the podcast aren't my patient, and I'm not making any money off that. And I'm not making money if you decide, hey, I'm not going to eat cookies and donuts and I'll try eating real food. I don't make any money off that. But I'm saying what I've been, grieved by is looking at the system saying, oh my gosh, like more people who are eating terrible are going to have more problems like you had. And look at how much money that is just from draining the system, and everyone's insurance rates go up. Medicare is going bankrupt and all the, and you look, it's like, man, if people got healthier, that would save the system more than, right. And us having a long talk like this, that saves more people than I can in my exam room. People hearing your story go, okay, Brian's an idiot, but man, look what Brett's done. Look at his life. Okay, maybe
Yes.
I'll do something, right? Because you're an example of that. If it doesn't work, people don't do it. These things
Mhm.
go away. Like Dr. Oz, all his white oak and all this stuff that he's been pushing, talking about over the years that never worked. They go away. You don't hear about it. It's a big thing for a month and then boom, it goes away.
Mhm.
So that's why
Yes.
doctors are jaded too. We've seen it all. And then you go, okay, I'm not going to learn about keto. That's going away. Well, they
Mhm.
don't know the data from 200 years ago where they were using low carb to treat diabetes and all this stuff, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's something sometimes we forget what our roots are, and going back to our knowledge and not just relying on a drug for everything. That is really, really important. And what your story, that's why it's so remarkable to me, because if 5 years ago I heard your story, I go, yeah, he's full of it. Can't happen.
Yes.
Once you're on that, you got it. It's a lifelong condition. You can get surgery and take out part of your colon and maybe you'll get better, right?
Mhm.
But doing it by lifestyle, no, I don't think so.
Mhm.
Right. So that's why we have to be open-minded and listen and learn and all that. So tell me, how did the meat mafia stuff get put together? Clemenza and you got your crew over there. What are you guys doing,
So,
and how did you guys
I
come
mean,
together?
you're an honorary. You might be the consigliere at this point, honestly, if you keep doing the stuff that you're doing too. But so it's a great story because my buddy Harrison, who goes by Clemenza on Twitter, we both played baseball in college together. He also went to Babson. We were pretty close in college, and some friendships you graduate and you drift apart a little bit. But we both started getting into these endurance races together. We started getting into triathlons. So when COVID hit, he was living up in Boston. I was in New York, and then I moved back home to New Jersey when the city shut down. And we said, hey, look, let's sign up for a full distance Ironman. So we were initially going to do Ironman Mont Tremblant up in Canada. That got canceled because of the really strict restrictions up there. And then we actually rolled our credit into Ironman Waco in Texas. So we said, look, we can do Waco and go for the weekend or go for a week, but why don't we just go check out Austin? We're both fully remote. Well, why don't we go? Let's get an Airbnb for a month. So that 1 month experience ended up turning into 3 months together. We just were like feeding off of each other's energy. He's had his own weight loss journey with the carnivore animal-based approach. I've obviously had my own journey with it. And we basically left that experience after doing the race saying, we need to just find a way to kind of like connect our passion and put it out into the universe. So he was really the one that pushed me to put that first Twitter thread out there. And I don't even know why he did it, but he created some pseudo anonymous account called Cannoli Clemenza. And then I said, well, it would be hysterical if I then created an account and we just become the meat mafia and just start informing people about this animal-based approach and doing Twitter threads and things like that. So we've really just been flying by the seat of our pants. It's only been about a month. And I think collectively we've gotten over 5,000 followers, and it's resonated with people. And now we've got enough motivation where we want to just keep putting out these threads and informing people of our own success. And, we're actually working on a free carnivore cookbook it'll be via ebook, just to give people 25 recipes that have worked for us to kind of spice up these dishes and make it interesting. And, it's free. We're not charging a dime for it, but we want to just put out as much good content as possible. And we just trust that things will happen. But I do know that we're in the mindset now that by the end of 2022, we want to be fully in this space doing it because it's genuinely what we're passionate about. Like I'm writing about this stuff for free because I love it. But if I could find a way to do this full time, it would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, I was just thinking about that this morning, actually getting ready for our conversation. I was like, right now, I remember I used to have to study for boards, and I mean, we still do, but it's so
Mhm.
annoying. Like stuff I never see. It's hospital-based stuff. It's pediatric stuff that I never see. But like how much time I spend just researching this stuff, because I'm like, okay, let me figure out why Brett's doing so well. Because
Mhm.
my next person with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, I'm gonna have a different approach now based on what you're saying, and say, let's give this a shot for a month and let's try different approaches,
Mhm.
rather than just saying, okay, here you go, just go on this med the rest of your life and that's it. We're not going to look, we're not going to talk to you. It's remarkable to me that no one talks about it. Like, like you were asking, like what GI docs, if there's any GI docs in San Diego who want to know this stuff, like, hey, let's talk. I would love to have you. Because it's really important, because there's so many. They go, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work. It's working for you. And the problem is your GI doc, you now he sees you and has to go,
Hmm.
wow, this is pretty interesting. Like at least you would hope that they say,
Exactly.
man, maybe I'll try this because I want my patients to get better. Because the doctor's not getting paid for putting on Remicade or other drugs. So,
No.
you think that they will, I want my patient to be healthier. And if I can do a different approach and maybe think outside the box a little bit, instead of just saying, here you go, take this drug, you're going to have side effects, you're going to have rash on your face and all that. That's not very good for long-term stuff, like long-term health. And then you say, if I knock my immune system down for the rest of my life, what does that do for other things like cancer? And when you look at the product inserts, you start realizing, man, there's a lot of other stuff that can happen. So if I can take it on a more natural approach, even if I can decrease my infusions to once every 3 months instead of every 8 weeks or whatever,
That's a win.
those kind
It's
of
a win.
things.
Yes.
It's a win for
100%.
the system, it's a win for you. And it's like, if you don't need it, then you go, okay. And I think in your case, you have the advantage of, if you go off, you get messed up and you go, okay, I don't want to get messed up. So I want to stay on track. And so a lot of us, we go off track and we go, oh, I'll get back next month. I'm just going to take a month off and relax and not really get back into it. So yeah, your story is remarkable. Thanks for coming on and sharing. I really appreciate it. And also, like, I have to ask you, like, what's life's best medicine for you? Like, if I say, hey, here's what, if I say, Brett, what really matters in life? What's the important stuff?
I think for me, it's as I'm getting older in learning more, I think just having meaningful connections with people. Like I've just started noticing, like if literally just being like, we could do this outside over coffee and like a good sunshine, a good walk, meaningful conversation. Like that's what matters to me. So I want to be able to build a life where I have the financial means to be able to actually impact other people and, spread the message about this diet and lifestyle and, just help get people in touch with their mission. Because I think the world is really, I feel like people have really gotten away from that. And, we live this artificial lifestyle where first thing we wake up, we blast our face with blue light. We sit in a cubicle doing something we don't really want to do. We're eating fake food that are loaded with seed oils. We're chronically stressed out, to your point. And it's like, we wonder why we're in this state. And I was there and I've kind of gotten into this more like ancestral lifestyle, and it's just completely changed everything about my existence. And, I just want to be able to share that message with people because we all deserve to thrive and feel amazing. And I genuinely think that we're all loaded. We all are like sitting on these massive reservoirs of untapped potential. And I think the diet and the lifestyle piece is so massive to unlocking that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that's it. And I think that's it when you have a good life experience and you want to share with other people. And that's why I'm excited to have this platform to be able to say, hey, let's get you on. Because I know this is just a launching stone for you. I'm sure
Mhm.
Sean's going to want to have you on. All these other
Mhm.
people are going to want to hear your story because, people are really interested in helping other people. Your story is very remarkable. When I saw the Twitter read, I'm like, I hope this guy's, that's why I wanted to talk to you beforehand. I go, I hope this
Mhm.
guy's legit and he's not trying to
Yes.
sell, right? And so
Yes.
obviously, clearly you are, and you've had a great experience. And I think people listening are going to say, wow, my cousin has this condition. Maybe I'll talk to him about it. Maybe because if
Mm.
you're miserable, it's just like anything. If you're miserable enough in your job, then you have to make the change. Like that's what I had to do. I didn't say, look, I can't work 16-hour days all the time and run around like an idiot and be stressed out and have patients yelling at me and people don't want to see me and they don't want to listen to me. And at some point you go, okay, I got to make a change. This hurts bad enough where I want to go enjoy life a little bit. Now I have so much fun. Like last night I was just sitting there after my last patient. We had so much fun and she's so motivated and so
Mm.
excited to get going. And man, and she has a lot of autoimmune type stuff. So I was telling her your story. And so like getting these little stories that we can
Mm.
say, hey, here's this guy's story. Let's hear Brett's story. Right. And so my next person who's devastated by ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, I can say, hey, maybe we kind of look at this lifestyle stuff and in addition to what you're doing. And then like what you did, you needed the
Mm.
medication at the time to get you through because otherwise you're going to die basically.
Yeah.
And so you go, okay, what else can I do instead of eating a terrible diet the rest of your life and being on drugs when you're 80 years old? That doesn't sound like a good option for me. And you would not be running marathons and doing what you're doing, like the Ironman stuff. So it's pretty awesome. So hey, if people want to know more about you, how do they contact you, or how do they become members of the Meat Mafia that you guys
We're
are
all, we're
starting? Right?
always we're always taking new members, especially we love to any steak pictures, any delicious carnivore recipes. We love to repost that stuff. But yeah, my it's kind of like my pseudo anonymous Twitter account, but it's at Mr. Salazzo. So I don't know if you link to those bios, but I would say Twitter is the best way to get in touch with me. And at this point, I'm pretty much putting out say about 2 threads a week on just different animal based or carnivore principles or things that have worked for Clemenza and I that people can start to incorporate. And like I mentioned, within the next month, we're going to put out that free ancestral cookbook. It'll be via ebook, and there'll be about like 25 to 30 recipes, very easy things, very easy templates that people could instantly start to incorporate into their own diet, to kind of spice up these meat-based recipes and make it even more delicious and easy to follow.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool you're doing it. So, oh yeah, we'll definitely put links to your stuff so people can start following you and stuff. And then we're both San Diego guys now, at least part of the time. So that would be awesome getting you, to talk at some of the local low carb get-togethers and all that kind of stuff, and really help people answer questions and get people on the right track. So it's really awesome what you're doing, man. I'm excited. I know there's a great future for you, helping people and just doing what you're doing. I mean, it's really, and thank you for sharing your story, because it takes courage to share your story when you go through all this stuff, because it's not, it's embarrassing to talk about going to the bathroom 30 times a day and going through all that. And there's people who are going to hear and go, oh my gosh, like I have the same thing,
Yes.
I'm going through the same thing. So maybe I need to get checked out and make sure everything's okay. And, get into a good gastroenterologist. And yeah, it really, hopefully in San Diego, we could build a team down here of people who really understand and are open-minded. I think that the problem is a lot of us close our mind and we already know the truth. And we just, what happens in medicine, I know, because I was never really one of those guys, but you get to a point where like, okay, so Dr. Oz said this and you kind of blow it off. But I think the problem with Western medicine, in my opinion right now, is we've made up our minds already without looking at the data and the evidence and anecdotes. Like people go, that's just an anecdote. Like they'll blow you off and say, you're just an anecdote. Yeah, but when you have thousands and thousands of anecdotes, then all of a sudden you have to start listening, and saying, well, maybe there is something to this, or what does it hurt to try? What's the risk and benefit of trying it for 2 weeks and seeing if you get better, right?
That's why your story is so powerful too, is it's like you had this, your own anecdotal, amazing experience on this diet. You lost a ton of weight, and then you're literally using this diet to get patients off insulin. It's so powerful. You're giving these people their lives back.
Yeah, and they're doing it. They have to do it. They have to go, okay, I'm hearing it. Let me implement and see what happens. But then, obviously the biggest factors we know are stress, lack of family support, lack of community. So we're trying to build those things and say, okay, let's build our own community of people who are like-minded, that we can help each other. And that's what you're doing too. You're building a community. And then I see you in the future saying, hey, let's do a Zoom meeting with all of us and we'll talk about recipes. We'll talk about life and stress and sleep and all these things. So as long as we stop, we don't look at those things, that's a problem. When you don't look at like, oh yeah, I'm only sleeping I hear it all the time. I'm only sleeping 3 hours a night. I'm eating perfect. I'm not losing weight. Well, you're stressed, you're tense, you're fighting with your husband all the time. You're going through menopause. Maybe your gut microbiome's out of whack. Let's look at all these things. Look at thyroid. Let's look at all these different factors and see how do we get. But I think being at peace and like what you're doing, enjoying what you're doing, loving to help people, that's the best medicine. That is the best medicine for a lot of us, is just making a difference in the world. Like ultimately we all die, right? We could maybe delay it by a week or a month or a year or 2 years, whatever, but we're all going to get there. And so it's like, I just heard that yesterday. It's like, you die twice basically when you die, and then when people never mention your name again. Right. So you want to be a person who has impact, long term, and in going down the generations.
It's so powerful. And now we have the ultimate tool of leverage of the internet, where you can share your story and get connected with people and add value. And you don't necessarily need to be an MD to add value. You can have a powerful story and build a community together. So that's what gets me so excited. Is I think for years I've always like the one prayer that I always go back to is like, God, just show me what the only thing I need from you is like, please just show me what I'm supposed to be doing, or whatever that passion is. Like, let me just find a way to run towards that and do that full time. And I feel like within the last month, I know that this is what I'm called to be doing. And I just can't wait to see what it turns into. Like, even if the only thing I get from it is just being able to connect with someone like you and go on this podcast. And if it helps one person with UC or Crohn's or IBS, like that's a massive win in itself.
Yeah. Or depression or anxiety or stress. I mean, those are the worst things to go through. It's like, being depressed and anxious and worried and all, that's what we're seeing a lot of, and we're seeing the health consequences of that, and we can't deny that. And so that's why you bring hope to people. That's really, being a light in the darkness and bringing hope, and then knowing your calling, because you're doing it for the right reasons. That's why I love people like you who go, look, it's helped me, I want to help you. And so it's like, you have an experience and you want to reach back and help people behind you. And then you're holding on to people like Sean Baker and all these other people's hands that say, show me what you know. And being humble enough to educate yourself. And then you say, okay, because you could have said, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and be miserable the rest of your life. I mean, that's the tragic part about the whole thing. But making some changes, and even if you don't have to be total carnivore, go, I'll just do it every once in a while. Or I have pasta when I go home and see mom. I only see mom a couple of times a year, and whatever, right? So I think all those, having that balance in life is so important. So, hey, thanks so much for joining me and for sharing your story. And I'm really excited to see what you guys have in store and hopefully one of these days we'll get Clemenza on here to talk to him and tell his side of it.
He would love it. He's classic. Yeah, you and I are definitely due to have a nice ribeye in San Diego, or eat some beef tongue with Doug too.
All right, yeah. Well, Doug will make that happen. Doug has a meat fest at his house. The only ones who we can't compete with is Ben Bakikio. He can eat like every steak in the world. Like he'll finish your steak for you, and that's how he is. But he's incredible. A beast. So yeah, we'll get together. I'm looking forward. It's good to have you in San Diego, and maybe we'll both be in Austin at some point.
Absolutely, that's the way things are trending. We probably will be.
Yeah. All right. Hey everyone. Hey, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Thanks for listening. And take this to heart. Listen to this. This is really important stuff. Of course, we're not giving medical advice. We're just saying, hey, look into it. Talk to your doctor. See what you can do. And, again, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Have a great day and a great week. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.